Kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea ngāro. Ki runga, ki tina a tātou. Kia mahia, te hua, ma kihi. Kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te araha, toi te reo Māori. Ki tuturu, ki whakamaua, ki tina, huie, taikie. So I've just asked the strength and force of our ancestors to be with us, to free our paths from obstruction, so that our words, power and love are upheld and that we're moving forward together. So I'll just hand over to Michelle for a little quick introduction and a little bit of housekeeping.
Mōrena koutou, ko Michelle Gallagher toko ingoa. I am the Program Coordinator here at the Centre for Social Impact and get to support our amazing associates bring you this mahi. So Te Pūaha Talks are a free series of webinars brought to you from the Centre for Social Impact with support from Foundation North. And if you've been before, you will know Foundation North love to know who's coming along and who their grantees are. So if you can get your mouses ready, please take a vote in that poll there. And Rach and Kathryn, you just click out of it if it's on your screen. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Great to see those coming in. Fab, you're super quick today. And so we also wanted to give you a little bit of a housekeeping today. So we are a short and sweet session. We've got some time for Q&A, but if we can't fit it all in, we're committed to answering your questions afterwards over email. We invite you to have your cameras on, introduce yourself in the chat. Yeah, and thanks for being here. We hope you get a lot out of it. So over to you, Rach, to introduce yourself. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Michelle. Ngā mihi, Kathryn. Kia ora koutou, ko waio, no Airani, engari ko te rana o ko tipuna, ko tangata tiriti aho, no tamaki makoto, toku kainga anainei, ko Rachel Trotman toko ingoa. So I'm Rachel, I'm of Celtic English heritage, tamaki makoto, West Auckland is my home, we're proud Westie, I'm mum to 2 girls, and I've been an associate with the Centre for Social Impact for about 10 years now. And I've learned to evaluate solely by just doing it, which we're all about today. So over to you, Kathryn.
Kia ora, Rach. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kathryn toko ingoa, no Czech Republic me Ingarangi o Kutipuna, no Tamaki Makaurau ahau, ko Kuautunu toko kainga e te rohi a iwi a Ngāti Hei, no reira tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm Kathryn. I'm originally from Auckland and I now live in Kuautunu, which is on the east coast of the Coromandel Peninsula in the rohi of Ngāti Hei. My ancestry is Czech on my father's side and English on my mother. And my background is in community psychology and evaluation. I've been an associate with Centre for Social Impact for about 8 years. So next slide, please, Rach. Thank you. So look, I'm just going to start with just giving a little bit of background about why we're here talking about evaluation and impact today. So last year we invited community groups who had attended Te Pūaha Talks, just like we are today, to give us a little bit of feedback about some of the issues and topics that they're grappling with. So these topics were things that you'll be completely familiar with, like funding sources, where do I get funding, strategic planning, community engagement, te tiriti o te waitangi, evaluation and impact. These are all the topics that were coming up as issues that people wanted more information about. So as a result of that, we developed these 3 capability development resources that are all live on the Te Pūaha website. So we've got the funding guide, which is for organisations that are new to grant seeking and needing support to apply for funding. And we've got the capability wheel for larger organisations who are looking for resources and tools to support improvements and their impact. And we've got the Core Skills Toolkit. So this resource introduces the topics that community groups said were important to them. It's for new or small organisations setting out on their journey, or for larger NGOs that are wanting a bit of a refresh about these topics. And each skill area is, well, quite important for building strong organisations. So these three resources are complementary. They can either be seen as standalone or as building blocks. So starting with funding, where do I get my funding from? Getting your core skills in place, and then moving on to finding resources when you get more established. Next slide, please, Rach. Back one, please. Number 3. Great, thank you. So the purpose of this series is to drill down into a little bit more detail about what's in the toolkit. And you can see in this slide what the topics are that we've included. So what's in there is really quite general at this stage. Each skill area has an introduction, a short section on why it's important, some questions, and some resources. So in this workshop, we are drilling down into evaluation and measuring impact. So this is our 5th workshop that we've offered on the toolkit, and we've got 2 more workshops this month on strategic planning and hauora. So at CSI, we've got associates who work across a wide range of topics, and today Rachel is going to share some of the things that she has learnt and experienced when working with community groups who are setting out on their evaluation journey. So over to you, Rach.
Okay, great. Can you all see that next slide about what we're going to cover? Okay, it's a bit of a delay on my end. Okay, well, welcome everyone. So this is a 101 or a refresher for people to evaluation. So this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at where you're starting and your mindset around evaluation, what's important to you. Look at focusing your effort in this space, 3 frameworks for doing evaluation, some of the core ingredients, and some really great resources to share with you. And if we've got time, we've got Q&A. Do want to invite you though, if you have questions, you'll all have things that you're coming with. Could you please put your questions, things that you're interested in the chat? And as we've said, if we can't address them in this session, we'll come back to you on them. Okay, so it's always good to start where you are with your team and your space and with yourself. Take a moment to just reflect. When you think about evaluation, what comes up for you? How do you see it? Is it something that you're bursting to do in your team? You're curious about? Is it a necessary evil for funders? Is it a compliance thing? What's the kind of thinking framing that you've got in your team about evaluating your work? In terms of, the purpose of evaluation, it is about assessing merit, worth, significance, impact, change. It is a way for you to see how you're manifesting your intentions, how you're living your values, how your practices are landing in the world, what assumptions are you working with and testing those. It's all about asking good questions about your work that you then plan good processes to collect information to respond to those questions. Simply, at its simplest, it's a way to evidence the difference you're making, but it's also about testing and learning and adapting together. Really great evaluation helps you to shape and guide and adapt and iterate your work, not just something that you do at the end of something. And if you think about why you're doing evaluation, there's 2 key reasons to do it. One is to create really good feedback and learning loops for yourself about how you're going. And I think the learning part of evaluation often gets dropped off, and teams often don't make too much time to learn, or evaluation is sort of lower down the list and often doesn't get the attention that it needs. But really, it's a way for you to do better things and to guide you. Secondly, to tell your story, it gives you evidence of what's going on and evidence of your impact. A key thing to think about when you're coming at this work of evaluation is Where do we put our energies? Where do we focus our effort? It does take time, it takes resources, it requires particular skills. So as a team, it's important to sit down and look across the breadth of what you're doing and talk together about what do we need to evaluate? Who do we need to do this for? What do we need to know versus what we've committed to with our funders? What do our communities want to know from us? So just, be quite strategic and clear together about what you need to evaluate. When you have that sense, then you can design questions around those things. What do we need to know? There's a need to know and a want to know, and focus on what it is you really need and what's just nice to have. Then you can design some methods to give you that information. And part of that involves who needs to be part of this work and who just needs to know about it. You do need to think about the resources you need for evaluation, and I really encourage all of you to budget for evaluation when you're making funding applications. You can make that as explicit or not as you like, but if your funders have a vested interest in you doing useful things, they're asking you to report back. So include some budget in there to evaluate. Then also there's a lot of creativity and there's a lot of things changing around how you're going to report your findings. More and more people are doing short video stories, or they're doing a photo story of their findings. Funders don't read big reports. Not many people read big reports, to be fair. And there's a tend to keep things, if you can do a one-page kind of key findings, a dashboard, and we'll get to what to include in that in a minute. So keep it lean, is what I'm saying. We're just going to touch on 3 different frames for doing evaluation. One is a real classic that a lot of you will already have come across. Another one is, anecdotally, we hear that this is really useful for grassroots community groups. And the third is around coming up with a metaphor for your evaluation and the way that you like to evaluate. So coming now to each of these 3. So this is a classic Western frame. What, so what, now what? Some people call it MEL, monitoring, evaluation and learning approach. So the stuff on the left, the what you're doing. So this is the descriptive information about your work. It's what you're doing or intend to do, who with, the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and what you think success will look like. This is kind of the territory of a theory for change, or a strategy, or a set of impact goals. The bit in the middle, the so what, is the evaluative part. So with evidence that you're gathering, you are speaking to what actually happened, what changed for whom, and that's the heart of evaluation. How well did we do our work? What's the quality of that? What can we say about successes? What didn't work? What was tricky? Where you made progress? A lot of evaluation doesn't get to this next bit. What actually made the difference in your work? And what have you learned about what's effective? And it often doesn't get into implications either. And often funders are just after 2 things. They want to know what you did, and they want to know the so what changed as a result. Some of them ask for learning stuff, but really it's those 2 things. So if you're gathering really good data around what you're doing and with who, and what's changing for them as a result, what's changing out in the world, that's the heart of it. The now what is really the what next. And this is the part that often also gets missed out, which is embedding and applying what you're learning and what you're finding through your evaluation, using that to change what you're doing, and getting your findings out into the world. Okay, so this next frame was developed by Kathryn and Fiona Cram. They had a hui with 60 or more iwi Māori providers, social service providers, and out of that came this frame. So it's got these 5 stages. So for anything that you're doing, identify successes or achievements. What's going really well? And this is a really strengths-based framework. It's designed to draw out your strengths and the good things and understand what's underneath those so you can do more of it. Any small or big success you can highlight, and then you look for evidence as to why that was a success. What did you see, hear or feel? What sort of facts were around it? 60 people engaged, for example, or people stayed. So you're making that evidence base explicit. You can involve other people in that, obviously, the people you're working with. And then you're exploring, well, what was behind each of those successes? What was really important for that success? And you draw out as many of those kind of success strategies. They might be practices, they might be ways of being, things that you did that were important. You look at all of that, you step back and reflect and go, well, what is that telling us? What is that saying around what is making a difference in our work, and what does that mean for us as we go forward? And then if you want, you can develop a theory of change or a kind of strategies for impact out of this by saying, well, these strategies that keep showing up, if we do these things, we are more likely to be achieving what we want. So this is quite a nice frame to experiment with. If you've got maybe a small discrete project, something quick, this is a fast thing that you can do. So this here is really, it's really use of metaphor for evaluation. So a lot of people, understandably, find evaluation stuff a bit dry. So the what, so what, now what. It can bring a lot more life to the work if you're developing or using a metaphor. So this one is a seed to harvest metaphor. You might use the metaphor of navigation or of baking a cake or of a garden. Some might use the maramataka, the phases of the moon. There's, it's, endless kind of possibility in terms of how you want to see this process, which generally follows the same pattern. So you are establishing your intent, planting a seed in this case. You are doing the work, learning as you go, tracking your progress because you've designed these good feedback loops. You're embedding what is working, and you are applying the findings, sharing the harvest, communicating the findings with others. So this example is from Community Aotearoa, and it's from a new website, which I'm going to share with you shortly. Okay, so just looking at some core ingredients. Once you've got your kind of frame for evaluating your process, these are things you need to pay attention to, ensuring are in place as part of that framework. So it does help to have goals, things that you're trying to achieve that you can evaluate against, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're just setting out, you're trying something, but you always have a broad direction of travel or a broad intent. So that's what you're testing against. Ideally at the start, you'd be thinking about, well, what would tohu or signs of progress look like for us? How will we know that we are doing what we're intending or making a difference? You set up some learning questions for yourself, some evaluation questions, things that you want to know as you go. And there's just some examples here from the what, so what example. And I really encourage people to make sure that you're including learning questions in the way that you do your evaluation. I'm seeing more and more community organisations, particularly those working in really complex spaces, which you all will be, focusing on a few things that they want to learn about over time as a team, as an organisation. What is it that we want to learn more about? It could be, what works for a particular situation or whatever it might be. And you keep coming back to those questions over time and gather your learning and use that to develop your work. The range of ways that you can gather information, this is also infinite, but the most common ones are your data about what you're doing and getting feedback from people. I think in the past it was sort of underplayed, seen as qualitative, what people think and feel. But actually, when you think about it, it's what people think and feel that actually drives everything. So that is really what you want to be getting good feedback loops on. And as a team and potentially with your partners, setting up regular reflective learning sessions as you go. And if you do one thing from this, I would suggest that you set up regular reflection and learning sessions based around your evaluation and learning questions. That becomes a really good evidence base for you. And then a sense of what good looks like for you. So how do you know? What's some kind of progress rating or rubric or tool that you can use to assess, okay, we're doing well here, we're doing not so well here. So just a sense of assessing that. And in the spirit of, being a bit more creative, we're definitely seeing a trend for people to use photos, tell stories, use videos. Here's a classic example, but you could try that in some of your spaces, like taking photos at the beginning, during, towards the end, if your work lends itself to that. And often, that's can be all you need to do. And just a little story that goes with that. Okay, and now we're coming to some useful resources that are recent or that are found to be really helpful. So just last month, Paradigm, which is part of Inspiring Communities, developed this resource called Tūhono Impact. So in part, it's a response to the government's, social investment approach and, more sort of downward pressure on communities to be evidencing impact. But it's done by for community. There's a lot of great community stories in there and community examples of groups measuring and sharing their impact. There's the What Works website, which is another Aotearoa website. That's recently been updated. It was about 10 years old, but that draws together information and resources from all around the world to help you know and show the difference you make. Niho Taniwha is developed by the Southern Initiative and Auckland Co-Design Lab, and it's drawn from Mātauranga Māori, and it's a ground to system learning framework. There's highly recommend you have a look at this on the link that you will be getting. There's more on Kataraina's approach, and through to Pūaha, there's actually a lot of material on Te Pūaha around introduction to evaluation. Here's just 3, some key ideas and frameworks. How can we know what good looks like, which is, that progress rating or rubric I mentioned earlier. And then some tools, different tools that you can use to gather data and capture learning. And finally, this one here. So this was done 2019 by Point for Auckland Council commissioned this to support groups that local boards fund to demonstrate their impact. and it's quite cool. It's based around making change statements, and just it's got a nice approach for really sort of grassroots work to tell a story around that. Okay, I think we are at the end of the presentation. So are there any questions there?
Oh, Rach, just before you go on to that, I'll just pick up the resources. Look, if anybody has any useful resources that they have around evaluation and they'd like to share with this group, please put them in the chat now. It's a great opportunity to share good resources if you've found something. And the other thing is that I'd say at this stage is that we're going to be monitoring how the toolkit is used. So we're keeping our ears to the ground about what new issues are emerging. So you will see the topics and the resources change over time if you keep your eye on the Core Skills Toolkit online. But now let's moving on to Q&A. There's been some questions that have been coming through, which is great to see. So Rach, when you got to the resources, you did mention the first one was about addressing some of the queries around social return on investment, and there has been a few questions and comments about that. So, I mean, we're hearing more and more about social return on investment and putting a dollar on social impact. In some cases, funding may even be dependent on doing this. What advice do you have for groups who are interested in doing social return on investment and looking at those frameworks?
Yes, this is a hot topic right now. And we have a blog on our website about this, which unpacks social investment and social return on investment. Firstly, I would say that social return on investment is only useful in a few circumstances, and it tends to be when the work that you're doing is comparable, has a comparable database at a population level. So, for example, if you're doing work in the health field, there are outcomes coming out of that you can compare with the general population. There's work that you're doing that you can put a dollar value to, that you can put an economic value to, and not everybody, can. So I would say that if government or another funder is requesting a social return on investment, that ask them to fund that, because it is quite, it's quite specific work, requires particular skills to do, and there's not many people in the country who are actually, qualified in it. And I would encourage you to have a conversation with your funder or whoever's asking you to do it, and also to kind of inform yourself about what social return on investment is and isn't good for. And you could start with that blog for a little unpacking of that.
Thanks, Rach. Just picking up on that, there was another question from somebody who was interested in requesting funding support for evaluation. Have you got some comments about how to budget? What would be some of the priorities when building a budget for evaluation? Would that be primarily time for developing tools or for implementation?
Yes. So evaluation, clearly takes time. So it's your staff time. If what you feel you need is beyond the capacity of your team, then it's seeking budget for a support person, an external evaluator. Sometimes it's a good idea to have an external person involved anyway, when it's a high stakes or a large program or a complex program. It's good to have an independent set of eyes. Also, when some work that you're doing, say you're coming to the end of 3-year funding, for example, everyone's got a vested interest in seeing how that work's going. So that's a good time to ask a funder for funding to evaluate that work. But basically, you're wanting budget for time, capacity, planning, design, writing up, there's quite a lot involved. So it's thinking through what you can do internally, but that also has a cost because it's taking people away from other work, and what you might need outside support for.
Great, thanks, Rach. That was really thorough. I think you really covered gathering qualitative information to build into the evaluation, but there was a specific question, or is there anything else you can add to a question that we had around about querying how to evaluate something that is qualitative and not output driven?
Well, what I was saying before is that what people think and feel is really important and valid. And, that is kind of the core content for a lot of qualitative work. So make sure that you're casting a wide net in terms of who you're talking to there. Talk to the people directly involved, but also your partners. Cast that net wide. And in terms of what counts as evidence, I would really encourage you to think really broadly about what evidence looks like in your space. And it could be things that you haven't thought of before. It could be things like if you're working with children, it could be things that the families are noticing and telling you, for example. It could be, so just think really broadly about the ripples that your work is having and how you might follow up with some of those ripples.
Thanks, Rachel. I've just, there hasn't been any other questions come through. So look, I've just got a question here about drawing on your own experience, Rachel, of working with community groups in a range of different settings. What would be some key advice that you'd give to community groups who are getting ready to evaluate their work or a particular program?
Well, I think reflecting on the content of this session, it's really sit down together. Evaluation shouldn't be done or left to one person off on their own, and it often is. Do evaluation planning and discussion at least together. Sit down and work out what you need to focus on, what you need good information around, and who for, and be really clear on your audience. Be clear on what you need as an organisation to kind of give you reassurance that you are, matching your intention. And have a wide view about what evidence is, and be creative about how you gather and present your findings.
Thanks, Rach. I think those are some really key lessons for success for embedding evaluation into your organisation and getting the results that you need. So we'll just move into the summary and wrap up for this session now. There's no more questions that have come through. So I'd just really like to thank everybody for coming along and showing your interest and your questions and queries in this workshop. As I mentioned before, this is the 5th of our workshops, so keep your eye out for the next 2 workshops that are on later this month. And if you're interested in looking in the recordings of the other workshops, you'll find these in the Toolkit webpage on the Centre for Social Impact website. So we're also keen to offer some follow-up support with Rachel. So there's going to be 5 slots available of 30 minutes each to follow up with Rachel any particular questions that you have coming out of this session. So at the end of this workshop, Michelle is going to send out an email and there'll be the opportunity to register if you're interested. So only 5 slots, so get in quickly if you're keen. We'll also send a recording of the workshop, and there'll be a quick Foundation North survey link that's in the chat. If you could fill it in, that would be great. Michelle or Rach, have you got any final comments or anything you'd like to say before we finish up?
No, just thanks for making the time today, and I hope you got something useful from it.
Great. Yeah, I'll close with a karakia. Kia whakairea te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai. Homie, hui, tai ki e.
Kia ora, take
Kia
care.
ora everyone.